Ghosts of Harrenhal. My name's Simon.
And I'm Mackelly.
Thank you for joining us for episode 171 of our chapter-by-chapter book review of A Song of Ice and Fire by George Martin. Today we'll be discussing chapter 27 of A Storm of Swords. That's Daenerys 3.
And as always, we're going to chat about the chapter and try not to spoil any future plot points for you, and hopefully we're going to provide you some entertainment along the way.
We'll summarise what happened, discuss our thoughts on it, provide some useful background, compare it to the television show, indulge in a little pedantry, and cover some relevant news and listener correspondence. Be sure to check out the show notes. They'll provide some additional information about the characters, the geography, the background of this chapter, which will help you, in particular, if you're not reading along.
Did you see?
How are you, Mackelly?
Did you see the joke?
I did. I'm being teased for the things I say, is how I feel. There we are. How are you, Mackelly?
I'm warming up. I'm thawing out a bit. It was luminary
It's a chilly day.
night.
It's a chilly day.
And an even chillier night. It was luminary night in the neighborhood where we all spend way too much money for white bags, sand, and little votive candles. And we line the streets of the neighborhood. Well, you do your part out in front of your house there. And then you walk around and see all the lights and the little bags. And of course, there's always a few bags burning. As cars drive by too fast. And if you don't have enough sand at the bottom of your bag, it blows over and the kindle lights the bag on fire. So there's an occasional bonfire in front of someone's yard. But it was a nice night. We had chili over at the neighbor's house first, and then we all went and walked around and looked at the lights. And
we had a street party here ourselves. I live on a cul-de-sac, and at the end of the cul-de-sac, we had a little street party. We have a very nice bunch of people on our street. We have a young couple who have like a 4-year-old, and the lady from that couple she is relentlessly positive and upbeat, and she's always getting us to do things like this. And then the person who lives sort of like at the top of the cul-de-sac, he is a DJ, and he has all kinds of cool things that he can lend for a party like this. So we have good music, we have a big screen with movies playing, so Elf is our usual Christmas thing.
Okay.
And he has, in the summer, he has like a foam maker and a paddling pool, and we all sort of jump in that. All kinds of fun stuff.
This guy's handy at a party, no doubt.
I tell you, he really is. And it was nice too. It was potluck, so everyone brought something. And we had a good time.
That's great. Sounds like a fun old time.
Yeah.
Yeah, living in a cul-de-sac is different than living on a through street. We live currently on a through, I don't know what else to call it, but a street that isn't a cul-de-sac.
That's different from a cul-de-sac, yes.
Yes. And but our previous house, we lived on a cul-de-sac, and last night we had like our 17th Christmas dinner with our friends from that cul-de-sac, like 17th annual Christmas dinner.
Not this year, but
no, over the years. Yes,
Gotcha.
None of us, only one family still lives on that cul-de-sac, but we are all still very close because we raised our kids together basically in the cul-de-sac,
Yeah.
playing hockey and all riding bikes and all manner of things in the street. So yes, living in a cul-de-sac has its pros and cons, we'll say. There are some disadvantages to living in a cul-de-sac as well. Sometimes you don't want to be quite that close to people all the time.
Yeah.
But speaking of my dinner last night, I put my trivia together, and I thought it was pretty good. It went over very well. So if you need it, I can share it with you if you are.
I mean, come on. I mean, I'm impressed that you've done it again. How many questions?
I did 20 plus 5 personal, a section of 5 personal questions like the...
Okay, and what was the best mark? That's always the key for me.
23.
That's too high. That's too easy.
They keep making me make it easier. Because one guy wins every year.
They're spoiling the fun.
Well, here's the problem is, the way I get around it is I add a lot of multiple choice. It'd be like a fairly tough question, but you got a 25% chance of getting it right, just guessing.
Right, but that's too easy. You need to push back against them. what if it's 25 questions, you want the winning mark to be 16 or 17. That's what you want.
That's where most people were, I will say. Most people were in the mid-teens. He's just very knowledgeable about things.
One. Okay, that's reasonable then.
Yeah. Yes.
Because I did a World Cup quiz. I don't know if you were there for that. I did a World Cup quiz.
I was not. No.
It was at work, and it was for a very large group. There was like 200 people playing.
Okay, I was not there.
And it was very good actually. It went over really well, but it was the nice thing about that was because it was an online quiz. There was points for doing it faster. So the quicker you answered, the more points you got, and so
right, yes.
So I don't actually know how well people did. I saw who won overall, and he might have got some wrong, but he was very quick with his answers. Apparently,
quick with his wrong answers, regardless.
I don't think you get as many points for that.
Well, one of the questions that I think so I added. There was 3 bonus questions. 3 of the 4 sections had a bonus question in it, and one of the bonus questions in the movies, music, and entertainment category was how many downloads did the podcast The Ghost of Harrenhal have last month? And only Stacy, of all people, got it right. So apparently she said she just guessed. I was like, did you hear me mention it or anything? And she was like, no, I just guessed. It's like, I was surprised that you got it right, but it was a multiple choice. So.
It was multiple choice.
Yes, yeah.
There was like 4, 1 million, and somewhere in between. So. Who got it wrong is what I want to know.
Yeah, everyone else.
So I actually went to a second party last night. Check me out.
Look at you.
Butterfly.
Party hopping.
And I met a guy at this party who I had a really good time talking to. And he was telling me about a friend that he has who tells great stories. Uh-huh. He said this guy really does tell really good stories. He's very, very funny at telling these stories. But he said he really knows it. He knows how good he is at telling stories. And he just, once he starts telling a story, he just wants the world to pay attention.
Right. Like, hey, I'm talking over here.
And he said that they were driving somewhere and the guy was telling him a story. And he said, hey, if I've told you this one before, and the guy at the party said, how does that sentence end? I said, just stop me. Let me know. And he said, no. He said, just bear with me.
Just bear with me.
I'm telling it anyway.
I'm telling it again.
I was tickled by that. I was tickled by the thought of it, but also by the fact that he was just it tickled this guy so much that he retold it later.
Well, so we had this lights, this luminary thing tonight, and like the central part of my Christmas display up near the road is these 3 Christmas trees of varying sizes, and the largest one, the center one, had the midsection out, and I'd let it go for a few days, but tonight was kind of like it's the luminary night. Yes, so I go out there after the Steelers game, and it's about probably 100 lights section that was out of the tree. And so I start going one by one. I've got a little tester. So I take a bulb out, put it in the tester. If it lights up, I put it back in. I'm going around and around because it's a spiral. Circle. It spirals to the top. And I'm going around and around. And as I'm making my way through, I'm like, how have I not come across the light yet? And I get to the very last bulb. And I was like, No, I touch that bulb and the section lights back up again.
No.
I was out there for probably a half hour. It may be more, just going bulb by bulb all the way around. If I had started at the other end, I would have been like, oh, well, that was easy.
I feel your pain on that one.
Oh,
That's
man.
Brutal.
Yeah, well, at least the section was lit for the big night of Luminary Night.
So let's get down to business. How did we leave Daenerys Targaryen? Last we saw of Dany, she was in Astapor, getting a rundown and sales pitch on the Unsullied from Krasnys Mo Naklos. She feigned not speaking High Balerion. She does. Instead, using a translator slave so as to get an edge on Krasnys. She learned of the horrible training methods used to produce the soldiers. Later, she took her frustrations of the day out on Ser Jorah, capping it with a slap across the face. Mackelly, why don't we give the summary of this one? And a special treat It was provided to us by our prolific summary scribe, Jenny of Oldstones. So thank you, Jenny. We appreciate your help.
Yes, thank you very much. And
I don't think we would have been ready to go tonight were it not for Jenny. So
that's very possible. We are already quite late, which I appreciate you. I was out doing Luminary viewing while you were waiting around for me, so...
It's fine. It's better sometimes if I don't start drinking until a little bit later. Just good for my health.
Well, yes, thank you, Jenny. This is a very well done summary. In fact, she titled the summary "The Great Slave Heist."
Well, there's a slight spoiler in that.
Well, let's get down to business and find out what the spoiler is. So Dany and company stand before the 8 slave masters, including Krasnys Mo Naklos, and several Grazdans. I think 4 of the 8 were named Grazdan. She astonishes the masters by telling them she wants all the Unsullied, even the partially trained and the recently cut boys. The slavers are taken aback and ask the slave girl for clarification, since Dany still feigns ignorance of High Balerion.
Dany offers to pay double when the masters balk at selling the trainees. One of the Grazdans, who seems to know a few words of the common tongue, informs her that with her trade goods, double would only get her 500 Unsullied. She offers her 3 ships as well, and the count goes up to 2,000.
How about we throw in a dragon as well? Sure. Why not?
It was always the big bargaining chip.
Yes, it was. Arstan Whitebeard immediately protests and implores Dany to reconsider. She asks Ser Jorah to remove him. The masters agree to sell her all she is asking for in exchange for the trading goods, ships, and Drogon. They throw in the slave girl as a bonus.
Dany leaves with her retinue, taking the slave girl with her. She scolds Arstan for disagreeing with her in public, then asks the slave girl her name, which is Missandei. Dany frees her and questions her about the Unsullied.
Back on the ship, she argues with Captain Groleo about selling the ships. When she's unable to sleep, she goes on deck and has a brief talk with Jorah, after which she then does fall asleep. She wakes from a dream to realize Quaithe is in her room. Quaithe repeats her prophecy she previously told Dany and Qarth, but when Dany gets out of bed, no one's there.
The next morning, Dany rides her silver into Astapor with all 3 dragons. Aside from her usual retinue, she is followed by all her people, including Grelio and his sailors and the 83 Dothraki that remain. The Masters and Unsullied are gathered in the Plaza of Punishment before the main gate.
Dany hands over Drogon's chain and receives the whip that symbolizes ownership from Krasnys. Dany rides down the line of Unsullied, shouting in High Balerion that the deal is done and she owns them now. She returns to Krasnys, who's having trouble controlling Drogon. Dany informs him dragons are no slaves, before lashing him in the face with the whip and ordering Drogon to light him up.
Drogon burns Krasnys to death. The other dragons are freed by Irri and Jiqui, so they can join in the fun. Dany's Blood Riders and Belwas begin attacking the few remaining Astapori soldiers who hadn't already fled. Old Grazdan orders the Unsullied to defend him, but they don't move, as Rakaro shoots him with an arrow to the mouth. Dany commands the Unsullied to slay the good masters, slay the soldiers, slay every man holding a whip or wearing a tokar, but spare anyone under the age of 12. Freedom, Dracarys, fire and blood.
Yes. It's quite the ending of the chapter. And well done, Jenny. First of all, let's just say that was very well done. When she says, but spare anyone under the age of 12, I was thinking there's probably some 11-year-old boy who thinking to himself, boy, I picked a bad day to get a fake ID. I should have waited. How are they supposed to know?
He's drawn on a mustache. I'm just a kid.
I swear I'm only 11. It says I'm 22.
So you put in the notes. There's something I wanted to ask you about. You put in the notes that the only way this works is if she gets them all. Now, why do you say that? Because otherwise they would still have an army to order to their defense. Is that the point you're making? That
is my point. Yes. If any are left under the Master's control, then they will fight her Unsullied for the Masters, theoretically. Yeah. So, that she thinks to herself, I need them all. 2,000 won't work. I need them all for what I want to do. That it's unclear whether she means for this little plan, this little trickery here, or to get to Westeros and win the crown. Yeah.
I will say I don't think she needed the unready.
I
because
agree.
they couldn't have stood in the way of the ready.
Yes, yes.
But she chose. I mean, they'll come in useful down the line, and in the meantime, she's sparing them the horrors of their training.
Yes, yes. And yeah, you're absolutely right. There was really no need for the boys for the reason she gave. Her reasoning was, well, I'm going to lose Unsullied in battle and I need these boys to pick up their spears and carry on. But, they're not trained. Most of them are younger boys. And, I thought that the demand for the boys could have been a red flag for suspicious activity if the masters hadn't been so blinded by the possibility of the fortune and the dragon that they were getting.
Yeah.
They might have questioned, what are you going to do with those boys? You can't train them yourself. So
right, yeah, it's suspicious activity for sure. Your bank would send you an email saying, "Are you sure you want to do this?"
Right. And speaking of the master's greed, it was kind of what she was banking on. I think her pretending not to understand High Valyrian helped lead to this whole situation because she got the inside scoop on the mindset of the masters because they were just speaking openly.
Right.
And
assuming she had no insight into what they were saying whatsoever, yeah.
Right.
Yeah. And actually, one of the things that she learned is that they have she didn't learn this by listening to them. She knew this about them, right? That the Giscari have a long history with dragons, and they crave dragons because the reason that they are not the highest of highs because they were defeated by Valyria, and Valyria had dragons, and that was always the difference. And so ever since then, they've had a bee in their bonnet about dragons.
Yeah, and so offering this idea of having a dragon of their own was just too much to pass up, really. Yeah. They couldn't see clearly beyond, we're going to get our own dragon, finally, after all these centuries.
The one thing I will say, and this is a sort of like a fundamental question about the whole chapter to me, is do the economics hold up? So you've said for everything she owns, you'll give them 2,000. So you're giving 4,000 plus for the dragon.
Right.
I get it. A dragon is a really desirable thing. Its rareness makes it extremely valuable. But It's young, it's untrained, it's going to be a menace.
Yep.
And you don't know how to look after it.
You're
taking a lot
all
on.
True.
And I'm just not sure. I mean, yes, I think it's important that they were blinded by the promise of it, because otherwise it doesn't make a lot of sense.
It doesn't. And there's definitely a little bit of dissent in the ranks. So basically there's these 8 masters, and they appear to be the top slavers in the city, and they're as it's kind of explained to us, they're rivals in all other slave trade, but they're basically the board of directors for the Unsullied. Right. And there's a debate from the board where they're considering the long-term negative effects versus the short-term profit of what they get out of selling every bit of Unsullied that they have.
Right.
And so you see the lower level, so there's these tiers of the masters. The lower level masters seem to have silver fringed tokars. Then the upper level have gold fringed, and then Old Grazdan, the oldest of the group, has pearl fringed tokar. And the silver fringed master is totally not sure about this whole thing. He thinks selling her untrained boys will shame us. But the gold trimmed are less concerned about the future. And his response to the silver fringed is, it doesn't matter. If her gold is good, I'd rather have gold. I'd rather have my money up front than worry about what happens in the future.
What's interesting about that is that I would have thought that the Silver Fringed would be more interested in the sort of like immediate profits, but maybe the Silver Fringed ones are sort of like moving up the totem pole, and eventually they'll be Gold Fringed, and so they have a concern about the long term because of that. But typically, the lower levels are more interested in immediate profit than the higher levels. The higher levels perhaps have the greater strategic view. And so,
true.
So it is a little bit backwards to me.
I agree. I was thinking possibly the gold trimmed and pearl trimmed are more secure financially and able to weather this downturn.
I wonder if they're older too.
Coming.
And so some of it is just like, let's cash in, let's have this big windfall now.
Right. Yes. Yeah. And so this silver trimmed master, probably a Grazdan, 50% chance that it was a Grazdan,
right?
Speaks up, and says, we can't sell her these untrained. They'll shame us, which is a worthy consideration, because if the lesser trained Unsullied failed to live up to the expectations and word spreads, it could tarnish the brand that they've so carefully and painstakingly cultivated. You know what
they should do is like tattoo them all across the face, not Unsullied.
Not only semi-sullied.
Yeah, exactly. Because then when the guy defeats him in battle, he'll be like, well, he wasn't Unsullied. So,
he was only semi.
So there's an interesting question about what they're going to do with Drogon. Obviously, it feels like because of their sort of history, they want to keep him and have a dragon and be invincible, and perhaps, well, I mean, there's no Valyria left to get their revenge on, but
all right,
maybe it makes Astapor a tourist destination and brings wealth and glory to the city. But the more obvious thing to do is to sell the thing for a ton of money,
Yeah, that's the thing. Like, the only way to really make it profitable is to sell Drogon and reap the financial benefits. Otherwise, you're only getting what they would amount to 2,000 Unsullied, which is her paying double, which is really only selling 1,000.
Right.
Which, that's a pretty paltry return to give up not just your 8,600 Unsullied that you currently have, but all your future Unsullied that are coming in the pipeline for what we learn here is the next 10 years.
Right. It's 10 years of no more sales.
Right.
Yeah.
So, and, speaking of that, a lot can change in a decade. This could be the end of Unsullied in Astapor and Essos,
right. Drogon could choke on a sheep bone tomorrow.
Then what?
Then what? Exactly. My soccer team, Oldham, once bought a player and he tore his ACL after 13 minutes.
Oh, well, that's unfortunate. 18 minutes. Oh,
13. Oh, 13.
Oh, 13 minutes. That's 5 minutes worse.
Yes, exactly. Who knows what he might have done with that extra 5 minutes? He never played for us again. That was
gosh,
his entire career.
That is unfortunate.
So Dany expects to be in Westeros within a year, so the dragons therefore still wouldn't be full grown, and so maybe this is why. Obviously, we know how the chapter ends. She had no intention of actually losing Drogon here, but why she's making the case for getting rid of Drogon for the army is because she wants something she can fight with today.
That's certainly a way you could interpret that, because otherwise she must be shifting her plans and putting the primary hope on the Unsullied, because her dragons would not be able to carry the day to get her to the Iron Throne within a year. You wouldn't think. That seems pretty unlikely.
Right. And then kind of in a strange sort of like reversal, Grazdan sort of undermines the Unsullied because he says that they could lose the battle with the Westerosi Knights.
Yeah.
And then where would he be? But I think the point he's making is, you can't pay me when you're on the Iron Throne, because there's no guarantee you're going to win the Iron Throne, even with this fantastic army of Unsullied that I'm laying at your feet.
Yes.
And he's absolutely right. I mean, taking control of a dragon is a very risky proposition, but taking control of an army of Unsullied who none of them know how to lead
Right.
is an equally tricky proposition. Well, not as tricky. They're not going to breathe fire on you just for the heck of it. But
Yeah, that
using
is very
them
true.
well won't be easy.
Right. Yeah, because she doesn't have enough leaders to use them necessarily well.
Right. So Arstan, advises Dany in front of everyone to not sell Drogon for the Unsullied. We've noted before that he speaks very boldly to Dany given the fact that he is a squire to a different guy in her retinue, not even to her.
Right. and not even one of her blood riders or, Jorah or something. It's strong Belwas. So
Dany finally loses her patience with him and sort of throws him out and tells him later that, she wants his opinions, but never in front of other people.
Which is understandable when you're you're the boss. You don't want your subordinate questioning you in front of... Yes, especially in the middle of a negotiation.
Yeah. Well, but you know what, honestly, it came across to me as pre-planned, even though she told him off afterwards. It's kind of like the sort of thing you would do if you were sort of trying to get them to fall into the trap. You react like this is a really bad idea. That'll make it look more realistic.
Yeah, so when they leave, that's like you just alluded to, she kind of dresses him down and says, don't do that. And I want your opinion, but not in public. But part of her anger at him is really anger at herself, because even the thought, even just pretending to sell Drogon kind of makes her sick.
Oh, yeah. I mean, and I understand that. I mean, like, she's basically selling one of her children, even if it is a trap and a trick. Just that thought is going to make you choke,
Yeah, oh, yeah, right. But, Arstan's advice, whether or not he knew at this point is unclear, but his advice was solid, without knowing what the second half of the plan was. You can imagine he is like, are you serious? You're going to trade Drogon for some eunuch soldiers?
But actually, though, I'm not sure it is good advice, because again, she can't wait forever to take the Iron Throne, right? The dragons are going to take time to grow. If she does this, she'll have an army of many thousands of the best trained soldiers on the planet and 2 dragons.
She will still have 2 dragons.
It's hard to imagine anyone defeating her. The only people on the planet able to challenge her would be the slavers of Astapor, and all they've got is 1 dragon and some untried teenagers,
As you say that, there was only one time that all 3 of Aegon and his sister wives' dragons were used in the same battle, and that was at the Field of Fire. So that just supports your argument there.
Yeah. And right. You fly in on 2 and you say, the other one's in the garage. Right. I could get him anytime I want.
So the Krasniz, he tosses in Missandei. Well, we don't know her name is Missandei just yet. She tells us in a minute that her name is Missandei, but the translator, who's been going back and forth between the Masters and Dany and was in last chapter as well, he tosses her in as a kind of a gift to her for, as he puts it, a deal well struck, which the deal may or may not have been well struck. I guess that's debatable. But, Dany asks what her name is, and she asks Missandei in High Balerion. And Missandei is like struck at the thought, oh, you could speak High Balerion all along. And so she first says, oh, and Dany goes, your name is O? And she's like, oh sorry. No, my name is Missandei. And she gives her Dany gives Missandei the opportunity to return home. She frees her on the spot. You're now free. You're a free woman. You can return home, or you can ride with me as one of my handmaids. And she says, Missandei says, no, I'll stay with you. I have no place to go. And Dany mentioned last chapter that the Nathi, which is what Missandei is from Noth, are a peaceful people who make the best slaves. So chances are any family she had was killed or enslaved.
Right.
Because she mentions here that she has 3 brothers that are now part of this Unsullied.
Right.
So she probably really doesn't have a lot.
Yeah.
Very possible she doesn't have a lot to go home to.
Yeah, I mean, and she's only 10 years old or something, right? I mean, she calls her a free woman, but I think she's only supposed to be 10 years old.
Yeah,
right?
she's young, 10, 13, something around that age.
And so she does warn her that, if she does stay with her, she might go hungry, she might die,
Yeah. See Dorea and Aroa.
Right. Where do I see those? Oh, not here.
Oh, not here, no.
But
Yeah.
Missandei then says Valar Morghulis, and Dany, of course, agrees. All men must die.
Yeah. So we now hear Dany kind of say what that means, Valar Morghulis. And Jaqen H'ghar told Arya that phrase when he gave her the coin, when he changed his face before he left Harrenhal, but he didn't explain the meaning of it. So now we see what it means. It means all men must die, which ironically, Arya, without knowing the meaning, has been saying that phrase during her nightly, in quotes, prayer of people she wants to kill. And it turns out it's somewhat fitting that she's saying all men must die in a list of prayers of prayer list of people she wants to kill, right? So,
but presumably she's saying it just to keep it fresh in her mind, right? So she
possibly, yeah.
What to say when she meets someone from Braavos, so that they can do whatever it was that they would do that Jaqen said they would do.
When she gives them the coin, I think.
Gives them the coin and says Valar Morghulis, right? That's what she needs to do.
Yeah. But so Missandei accepts this role as the of the third handmaid to Dany, and I thought she might want to do a little research on that third handmaid position, because it's kind of like the Defense Against the Dark Arts teacher in Hogwarts. It seems rather ill-fated. Dorea and Aroa both came to very poor, tragic ends in that role. And I often wonder if, not often, but I wondered when I was reading this chapter multiple times, if Irri and Jiqui tend not to get too close to that new handmaid. He won't be around long.
We're just going to call you O.
So Dany asks Missandei to get into the palanquin or whatever they're traveling by so she can talk to Missandei. And basically she's asking probing questions about the Unsullied. She's trying to do some investigative research. I'm thinking it's possibly to make sure that the plan she has in mind is going to work, because she got this sales pitch from Krasniz in the last chapter about, all these things about the Unsullied. And if I were her, I would also want to make sure that the things I was told are accurate before I put them into action, you know?
Right. Yeah. And it comes, one of the things she asks about is what to do with them after the war. Let's assume that Dany runs off and wins the Iron Throne with these 8,000 Unsullied. Well, what do you do with them then? You're holed up in King's Landing, right? You need a standing army, but not necessarily this large. And also, we know that they have a tendency to get fat if they're not being actively used. So,
aren't we all?
But I mean, I guess the one thing is that she frees them. I think she says that, doesn't she? Certainly she does in the TV show, and I think she sort of hints at it. Break all the chains. I think that kind of includes their own.
Yeah, at the end of the chapter, she says, "Freedom, Dracarys," and they start shouting Dracarys. Hopefully, they heard the freedom part. But I did some thinking about what she could do with them. And so my first thought was the gold cloaks, of course, she'll be in King's Landing.
Many.
It is. It's a lot of mouths to feed around King's Landing with the extra 8,000 gold cloaks. Yeah. But of course, there'd be no worries about corruption like we've seen with Jaina Slint and a lot of the other gold cloaks. However, to be a standing police force, you kind of need the ability to see the gray, to use common sense and judgment. And it's unclear how much cognitive ability, we talked about it last chapter, has the wine of courage impacted their
Right.
their cognitive abilities at all because they can't lead themselves.
Yeah.
And so that's one thought I had. And then I thought, oh, here's a good option. Send them to the Night's Watch.
Oh, very good. They would not be missing out on anything.
Right. They'd probably have to bundle up a little more than what they're probably used to wearing, but it will be a huge bonus for the Night's Watch. It increase their numbers many-fold.
Yeah, that's solid.
And it's certainly better option than the mass suicide that Missandei suggests as a possibility.
Effective, for sure. So Dany's forced to argue with Captain Groleo, seemingly about him objecting to her stealing and selling Illyrio's ships, including the one that he captains, which presumably irks.
Yes. Yeah.
So wait a minute. I'm a captain, and you want me to walk across Essos?
Right. Plus, he's the captain, so he's also responsible for the well-being of the ships, the men on the ships, and its cargo. And she says, even if Illyrio's not here, and even if he was, he couldn't talk me out of this. And I'm like, yeah, but it's his stuff.
Right.
So
he might be able to talk the slavers of Astapor out of this. You can't take that stuff from her because it's not hers. It's mine.
Not hers. But of course, he doesn't know that she doesn't plan on selling the stuff. So, you can understand his confusion. You're doing what?
Yeah. So she has a bad night's sleep, and she actually dreams of Quaithe, right? The woman from Ashai who she met in Qarth.
Well, first she has that dream
of riding a dragon into the trident.
Yes, she's Rhaegar,
but on a dragon
at the trident with the battle. The battle against Robert. But instead of Robert's force being on the other side, the enemy is all in ice. And then she breathes, she has Drogon breathe the fire, and the enemy all melts, I guess, basically. Yes. And I wondered if that possibly could be a nod to the war that Melisandre references between R'hllor and the Great Other. Mm. Yeah, just
it's yet another pointer to the fire and ice thing, the battle between fire and ice.
I just, maybe it's foreshadow of Dany's role in that great battle.
Yeah.
But then it's unclear whether Quaithe was a dream or Quaithe was using some sort of magic to appear, because Dany wakes from that dream. Think it's really, really dark. She thinks she sees someone standing over her, and that person starts talking, and it's Quaithe. And yes, Quaithe was one of the three that rolled out to Vase Teloro to welcome her into Qarth.
Right, that's right. Yeah.
And basically Quaithe repeats the prophecy that she told Dany when she was in Qarth. And there's not really a lot more there really hasn't been a lot more development for us to discuss what new might be evidence that we could point toward what these things mean. But the first part is go north. To go north, you must go south. Then to reach west, you must go east. To go forward, you must go back. To touch the light, you must pass beneath the shadow. So, do you want to recap what we discussed last time? For anyone who's like, what did you guys say?
well, actually, just sort of thinking about it fresh again, she's already done some of this. If you think about it, she was on the shore of the Narrow Sea, and then she's marched all the way across the continent in the opposite direction.
Right.
And now she got on board ships which would sail her back, and then she flogged them, and now she's marching back across the continent one more time. It feels like she's taking quite a few steps against her own progress. But along the way, she is acquiring the tools she's going to need to win the Iron Throne. So
yeah, that's true. That's true. Dany, at the time when she first heard the prophecy, thought that going west meant going to Ashai, because Quaithe is a Shadowbinder from Ashai.
Right.
And Quaithe didn't say wrong when Dany asked if that was what she should do. So it seems like that's possibly what she's indicating for the going west. But you're right. she went very far. She went from the west coast of Essos all the way east, and now she's coming west again.
So the go north. To go north, you must go south. Could be the message that if she wins the Iron Throne, which is the southern part of Westeros, she would have to then go north to fight the looming danger from beyond the wall, perhaps.
Right. Rally the realm, rally the Seven Kingdoms, and unite the Seven Kingdoms as a strong force before you try and take on the Great Other north of the wall, possibly. Yeah. Go forward, you must go back. It sounds like before she can leave Essos, she's got to deal with something. Most people at this point think that it's something to do with the Dothraki. Possibly face down Khal Drogo and take his Khalasar as part of her force.
Interesting, yeah. That's definitely possible.
One idea is to go back to Dragonstone, where she was born, and possibly team up with Stannis or something.
Oh yeah, that's an interesting guess. Yeah,
that'd be a tough sell, considering it was Stannis who was sent to Dragonstone to put an end to her and her family after the sack of King's Landing.
Right, but now that if you think of Stannis' position, his two brothers are dead. He's essentially defeated, and who's on the throne? The child of two Lannisters. It's absolutely he definitely would want to usurp that throne again, and maybe ditch his wife in favor of Dany might be a solution for him.
Could be. One place she could go back to is her current destination is Illyrio Mopatis in Pentos.
That's a return, yes.
Yeah, where she married Drogo and began this grand adventure, and she got her dragon eggs there, so, maybe she'd be going back to where it all started.
Yeah. And she might face a shadow there, which could be the look on his face when he discovers she sold his ships.
A shadow fell across his face.
I'm gonna touch the light, you.
To the moon, Dany, to the moon.
So touch the light, you must pass beneath the shadow. That feels like a connection to Ashai by the shadow, as it's fully titled, but it is by the shadow, not in the shadow. But Bran saw shadow stirring in the east beyond Ashai in his dream.
And Quaithe told Dany she'd find the truth in Ashai. So
she wants her to go there, so she would say that.
She would. But all the stuff we've been mentioning is going in a million different directions. So
yeah, she can't do all of it. Yeah,
she can't.
And
right.
Almost no matter what she does, you can point to it being, that fulfills the prophecy.
Right. Yeah. And I keep wondering why Quaithe can't just tell her what she's supposed to do. Why do you have to put it in a riddle? Just tell me what you want me to do.
But so the battle ensues, and things go how Dany and Jorah expected that they would. The Astapori demon-horned proud warriors fled or were easily killed by the small Dothraki force. The Unsullied took care of the rest because they are loyal soldiers to their new owner and did what they were told. And the masters, their judgment was completely clouded by the idea that they would have a dragon. They really didn't think through the possible consequences.
Yeah, and the consequences include they gave away all their Unsullied. They didn't keep any in reserve to defend them or the city. But, the chapter ends with a little bit of a mixed message from Dany, because she commands all the Unsullied to kill the masters and the men in the tow cars, the soldiers, strike the chains off all the slaves, don't harm the children. She commands them all to do this. And then the next sentence she says, freedom, you're free.
Yeah.
So which is it?
Well, it's a sequence of events.
Right. Once
Here
you've done
orders. Once you've fulfilled those, you're free.
Yeah. The very last paragraph has a line that she raises this whip, which is the, kind of the
Symbolic.
person that, symbolic. The master of the Unsullied holds this whip, and she raises the whip. She raises the whip for all the Unsullied to see, and then flings it aside. And I thought, what happens if a master runs over and picks up that whip? I've got the whip now.
It's like Carson in her class with the talking stick.
Right. I've got the whip. Because, last chapter Krasniz said that the Unsullied had no use for freedom and they would kill, because she said to Krasniz, what would happen if my enemies offer them freedom? And he said, they would bring you their head or something like that. They have no use for freedom. And yet, they seem to accept the offer of freedom pretty quickly here. The chapter ends before...
They did it while standing at attention. Thank you. What next? Okay. that then reminds me of something. I know I've quoted this before on the podcast, but the scene in Life of Brian where he says, "You're all individuals." Yes, we're all individuals. I'm not. Do you have some background for us?
I got a little bit of background on Noth. Noth is, of course, where Missandei is from. And Noth is also known as the Isle of Butterflies. It's an island in the Summer Sea off the northwest coast of Sithorios, basically due south of Valyria, across the Summer Sea, kind of between the Summer Islands and Sithorios. Dany told us a bit about Noth last chapter. She mentioned that they have a unique look, having flat faces, dark skin, and golden eyes. And as I mentioned earlier, she also mentioned that as pacifists, they're widely considered to make the best slaves. They're dubbed the peaceful people due to this extreme pacifism. They kill absolutely nothing, including animals. Their diet consists of only fruit. The Nothi god is called the Lord of Harmony, and the people believe that butterflies are messengers of the Lord of Harmony. That belief is one of the reasons butterflies are so highly revered on the island, although not the only reason. It's also believed that the butterflies protect the island. This is in reference to the butterfly fever that, throughout history, has stopped many a would-be conqueror in its tracks. The fever has prevented all-out conquering of the island, but hasn't stopped slavers from poaching the island. Slavers have wised up and began limiting their time on the island, going with quick raids over prolonged occupation. And this has forced the Nothi to leave the coasts for the inland hills and forests.
Interesting.
Yeah, cool stuff. Well, not really cool stuff because they're being enslaved.
Well, true, but I kind of like the story aspect of that.
Yeah.
So, comparison with the television show, all of this is pretty well captured in the show. It was kind of done in fewer scenes. So, for instance, Missandei is still Krasniz's until there's no time with Missandei and Dany before the fight.
Sure. Yeah.
Probably for CGI reasons, only Drogon is brought to the battle. The other two are left back on the ships. The whole stealing the ships and the goods is kind of played down. It's kind of the dragon for the Unsullied in the TV show.
Okay.
The reveal of her language skills is a highlight because Missandei is the first to notice. She whips her head round like, wait a minute, that lady just spoke High Valyrian. And I did notice as I was watching the scene, I watched some of it on YouTube, that a lot of commenters on the scene complained that this is the moment where they fell in love with Dany. Where she showed sort of like her cunning, but also her, her ruthlessness, but also her goodness, her innate goodness. She's freeing the slaves, and she's punishing the wicked. And that several of the commenters went on to say, what happened at the end of the TV show, the end of the final season, is a complete betrayal of this Dany. It was not the same Dany.
Very much, yes.
So it was interesting to read that. But it was a fun scene. Literally, the best part of it is the High Valyrian reveal, though. Just because Missandei notices first and then Krasnys second, and it's sort of more of a slow dawning on him that he's understanding what she's saying, but Missandei spots it straight off the bat,
as a translator might.
Yes. Although for a translator, you might not spot the fact you suddenly started to understand them as quickly because you would have understood them either way.
True, you would have understood both sides of the language, right?
So pedantry, it's a character decision, but Krasnys, did he never conceive of, I mean, the Masters as a whole, did they never conceive of this danger? I mean, even before she took all the Unsullied, and so they were left with nothing to defend them. Just the dragon. It's a dangerous gift if you don't know how to control it, and it felt like, could you not see it? But again, it's a character decision, so, and like I say, by giving the backstory of the Giscari and their trials and tribulations against the Balerion dragon riders, it gives you some justification for this. But for
their blindness
to it, yeah.
It is rather short-sighted, which one of the masters tried to point out, but I guess there was too much greed.
But the other thing is, I think generally this is a danger. Whenever you sell a bunch of Unsullied, this is a danger. You know, here's a big sack of gold. Unsullied, kill that guy. You know, I mean, it's. I would think you'd have a clause. You'd have a clause with the Unsullied. You can't attack me for 1 week after the sale. You know,
or ever.
Yes.
Never attack Astapor.
Yeah. So news and notes.
Well, I just wanted to mention that we got a new Lord Paramount Sustainer, Derek W.
Welcome aboard, Derek.
Yes, thank you, and welcome. And we look forward to connecting with you and interacting with you.
Excellent.
And I think we mentioned this last episode.
I was just editing last episode, and I know we did this because I heard all this.
We added a new perk to all levels. I like to call them wildfire side chats.
Oh, it's very good. I see what you've done there. Yeah.
I can be clever.
He's awfully proud of himself, listeners. He's got a grin on his face when he's saying that.
So basically how it works is we're asking sustainers to send us topics. We're just going to chat about the topics for however long it takes for us to exhaust ourselves chatting about the topic. And then
I can't go that long. You're
depends on the topic. If the topic is Oldham Athletic Soccer, you might be able to go longer.
I'll go longer than you on that one. That's true.
Yes. And then we're going to upload our discussion to the Buy Me a Coffee Sustainer page. So
yeah. And because it's the end of the year, a shout out to all of our sustainers. We love you guys. Thank you so much for keeping us going.
Absolutely. And actually, I realized today this will be the first episode of next year.
Oh.
I believe this episode's coming out the second and the third, depending on whether you're a sustainer or not. But still, the sentiment holds.
Yes.
And we added a new shirt design on the Threadless site. So if you're interested, go check it out.
I will say, Mackelly, when we started this, I never imagined that I would have to make fashion choices. You know, that I would have to be critiquing the design of T-shirts. It's not a skill. It's not a skill I have. I'm like, no, it looks nice.
It's not a skill I have designing either. So
you did a good job, I think, but I don't know.
I've asked around. Most people tend to think it's a cool design.
Cool.
So.
Well, good enough for me. And just if anyone could go out there and subscribe to us on YouTube, and that would be very helpful. We'll probably have more YouTube content going forward into the new year. So, but if you subscribe to us, that helps helps the algorithm.
Yes, it does. Helps us unlock things that we'd like to do. Yeah. We need listening hours and subscribers. So if you want to help us out, that'd be very cool.
So let's conclude. Dany got her fighting force, and ultimately on the very cheap. I don't know if she's going to get all the goods back, and Captain Grolio will be delighted if he gets his ship back.
Yes,
but
he surely will.
She has too many people for the 3 ships now, so she's still got to go overland, even though she might get the ships back.
Right, yeah. She's still got to march the Unsullied across Essos. Yeah. So, but she can't truly expect to be in Westeros in a year. I mean, that had to have just been a ramping up the time frame as part of negotiation tactic.
Yes, possibly, but why not? I mean, why not? And we've talked about this before, that she has places in Westeros where she could go and let the dragons grow, and now she's got an army. She could already be making strides towards winning back the Iron Throne before the dragons are ready for the fight. And by the way, the dragons kind of proved themselves ready for the fight today. Not totally, but they did. They did some damage.
They were, I guess they took the opponent unaware, which is helpful.
Yes.
But
you know what? The first time you bring a dragon to a battle, it'll take the opponent unaware. That's for sure.
That's true.
The second time, he needs to be pretty well defended, but the first time, it's going to be like, oh.
Yeah, but, what happens now? It doesn't seem that there's much left to defend Astapor and or the Masters, whatever Masters are left. So...
Yeah, no, it's a good question. I mean, she may have to do some sort of rebuilding of Astapor. If she's going to sort of free all the slaves, it's going to need a new kind of government in place, and she might get sort of embroiled in that before she can march off towards her actual end goal. Exactly.
And there's an issue here because Jorah told her last chapter that one of the reasons that the Dothraki never sack Astapor is because they're afraid, maybe the right word to use, of the Unsullied. And, she's going to march these Unsullied out of Astapor and there won't be any to replace them. So are they opening themselves up to danger of being sacked by Dothraki?
Right. Yeah, interesting.
And, news is going to spread pretty quickly of the events here. And you'd imagine they're going to get to Meereen and Yunkai, the other two major slave cities on Slaver's Bay. And, what's going to happen with that? Will they mount defenses at their city walls? Will they form a force to try and defeat Dany?
Yeah. Yeah, it's hard to know because, obviously... If she is freeing slaves, then she's got a reason to stop at those cities. If she's willing to say, well, you carry on doing whatever you want, I'll be on my merry way, then they don't have to defend against her,
True. Yeah. But exactly. If she's now in the business of freeing slaves, are those the next two cities? Do they need to be prepared? Yeah. And it just generally, it can't be good for business when something like this happens, even to a rival city.
True.
You don't want to give others the idea of doing the same, whether it's Dany or not, and you certainly don't want to give the slaves hope for an uprising themselves.
Right. You perhaps you do a bit of PR on that. Perhaps you sort of make the point that the only way you slaves are getting released is if a dragon comes to free you. The chances are pretty slim.
Yeah, that's true.
Where are we going next week?
Next week, we are off to King's Landing, where Sansa gets that gown she's been waiting for.
Sansa's gown. How exciting. Well, while we wait for more fashion discoveries, there's 3 ways that you could help us. You could leave us a review. You can buy some merchandise at ghostsofharrenhal.threadless.com. Check out Mackelly's latest creation.
That's right.
You could buy us an Arbor Gold at buymeacoffee.com/ghostsharrenhal. Become a sustainer at the Lord Paramount or Knight of the Realm level and get all those benefits.
And of course, you can reach us at ghost.harrenhal@gmail.com. You can follow us on Twitter at @ghostharrenhal. We're on Facebook, Instagram, Discord, and YouTube.
Thanks for listening.
Thanks.
Bye.
Bye.